See? Pretty face. What are you laughing about? No, I'm just kidding. All right, let's do this thing. So this is recording now. Whatever's on my screen right now is recording. Does that understand? All right. And when you go home and you watch it at home, let's say you want to take a screenshot or something like that, just literally push print screen and then save it. Does that make sense? Now, I think I mentioned this last time, though. I don't recommend ever taking pictures or doing screenshots. It's a very, very, very bad way to study. All right. It's a really good way to forget everything. Okay. But if you just write it down when you're doing it, I swear to God, you remember a lot more. All right.
Yeah, that's what I do. I like reading.
You have to. Otherwise,
That's how I learn.
I don't know how, honestly, anybody can learn otherwise. Like people always say that they're different types of learners, that they're auditory learners, they're visual learners, they're this type of learner. No, you're not. All right. Everybody learns the exact same way. You got to learn from all these different aspects. Does that make sense? Like I've yet to see a single person that can learn math without watching. I've yet to see a single person that can learn math without listening. I've yet to see a single person that can learn math without doing the problems, writing them out. Does that make sense? So sometimes people say there's people that are kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing. No, you don't. Someone needs to show you how to do it. Does that make sense? They say some people learn by videos and they learn by watching. I've never seen that person. Okay, not with math. Once they see how to do it, they still need to practice. Does that make sense? Right? It's just not true. Does that understand what I'm saying? All right. Anytime you hear a teacher say this bullshit, it's bullshit. I can show you 20,000 papers that say that they don't know what the hell they're talking about. All right. But the research papers that they've done at Harvard, colleges, all kinds of different colleges discussing this type of ideas. All right. So I'm just telling you, you need to get the information from multiple sources. And then if you get it from multiple sources, you usually can end up figuring it out pretty easily. Does that make sense? If you hear from just one source, it is pretty difficult. Does that make sense? All right. Question?
Like 10 seconds to go up.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I just recorded it on there. I'd rather you go back to that thing. All right. I apologize. At the end, I can give it to you again, though, also. All right. I'm just worried that I'm not going to get through this stuff, and I don't want to not be able to at least go over what you need for the homework. All right.
Oh, and so I need my homework too. I submitted. I thought I made a mistake and submitted some that was like due for like February something.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We'll look at it. So then this thing here, that's not going to make any difference though. You'll be okay. It's not like it's going to count against you. All right. So then A prime here, right? Man, I feel like we just did this. All right. Well, what's the answer to this one? That's correct. 3, 5, 7, 8. Because again, this thing just means not that crap. Is that right? So not the A stuff. So not this stuff. Not that. Not that. Not that. Okay. 3, 5, 7, 8. Is that correct?
How do you get the right to the
So U is considered to be the overall set. We said this last time that U is the universal set or the overall set that you can sort of like take things from. So then they say A is this stuff. Okay.
Use the universal set.
Yeah, U is like this big set that we can take stuff from. All right. So then A is this stuff. All right. Well, then they say not A. So then I have to remove the stuff from U that is A, and then whatever else is left over, that has to be the answer. Does that make sense? You understand? What about B prime or the complement of B or not B? What is this? That's correct. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So then, because this we would just cross out 1, 2, and 3 leftover stuff. Is that right?
U and B is what?
Not B. Look here. Look here.
Yeah.
B is this, right?
1, 2, 3.
So he says not B. What is the stuff that's not B? Not those though.
Not those.
Yeah. So not this. So it's that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The rest of the stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's just the symbols. You got to make sure you do enough of the problems so you remember what the symbol means. Okay. Try and do the problems to do that. Try and do the problems. Do more of the examples. You remember what the symbol means.
You can give me like some practice.
It's on the homework. All right. All right, this one. This is a little bit more confusing. Okay, so this one says this thing or this thing. That means or again, right?
I thought that means universal.
Close. Close. You're missing something. That's correct. This is equal to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, again, all I think about is just the definition of the symbol and then which two sets we're talking about. Does that make sense? So in this case here, this thing says or, right? So it's the stuff in this bag or the stuff in this bag. Does that make sense? Which means it's either this stuff or this stuff. Is that correct? So tell me all of the things that's in here or there. Okay. Well, I guess we have 3, 5, 7, 8, right? And then what else do we have? Well, we also have a 4 or a 6. Is that correct? So we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Does that make sense? Because or means either one of them. Is that right? Not the stuff that's in both of them. Do you understand? Ram? Do you understand though?
Yeah.
And means the one that's in both of them. Does that make sense? Either one of the two things. So just give me all the stuff. Just don't count it twice. Does that understand? It's like you got 2 bags, right? Purse here, purse there. What do those ladies have in either of the 2 purses? Does that make sense? Question? All right, what about this one? Now this would be the 5, 7, 8 is correct. Because now this one says this is the stuff that's not in A and the stuff that's not in B. Is that correct? All right, well, we already know what not A and not B are, right? So it just says and these 2. Does that make sense? So what are the elements that's in here?
That still mean and or not?
This one means and, the little apostrophe means not.
Oh.
So then this stuff here, what's in this one and this one? Well, 5, 7, 8. This is just because we went over this stuff last week. All right. Question with this? Anybody? So you just got to remember the difference between and or. All right. Okay. Now they just start making it longer and more annoying. So here, what does parentheses mean in math? What does parentheses mean anywhere? That's actually true, but that wasn't really what I was looking for. But that's actually true. But there's another thing usually we say what parentheses are about. Sorry. Do what's in it first is correct. Okay. All it is something that tells me like an order. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Correct. It's the first, exactly. So it's the first thing in order of operations, right? So then so all it means is like, look here first, do this first, right? So that's still the same crap. It doesn't mean anything different. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So all this means is do whatever this garbage is first. Does everybody see that? Okay. So typically what I would do here is, first of all, this question is kind of impossible. They didn't tell me what P is. It's kind of heated. All right, so let's call this P here. See? That's why it's good to have a pen. So no, I didn't make these worksheets, so I don't know, but they're good enough. So there's a few mistakes though throughout this thing. You'll see as we go through. I'll keep saying them. I'll be like, this is kind of doesn't make any sense what this person wrote, but anyway. All right, let's call that P, that Q, that R. Let me see that. All right, so just start writing this out. So P is what? 8, 10, 11, 12. I can't really do anything with that yet because I don't know what's inside the stupid parentheses yet. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So instead, we just do this now and then write that here, or whatever this is, and we just do it step by step. Does that make sense? So effectively, this just becomes 2 questions as compared to the other ones being 1. Does that make sense? Yes? Well, together, what does this symbol mean again? No. That means and. Is that correct? Right? So this one means and. So then what am I gonna? Sort of. But so what is Q and R? Just 6. Oh, 6 and 13, sorry. So then the thing that's in Q's bag and in R's bag, well, that would be 6 and 13 are common. What's an element of Q and an element of R? Does that make sense? So then that means it's going to be 6 and 13. Does everybody see that? All right. Okay, now we just continue. So how would I do this now? Union P with whatever this is, right? So what is that going to be? That's correct. 6, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13. Because now it says the stuff that's in here or the stuff that's in there. Is that correct? Either bag. What's in either bag? Does that make sense? Well, this is the stuff that's in either bag. Does that make sense? So or is always bigger than the 2 sets. Or could be as large as the biggest one. And then and is always smaller than 2 sets. Or could be as large as the smallest one. Does that make sense? Do you understand? Question with this so far? Any questions? We're gonna do a million more. That's all they are. They're just gonna add more knots and stuff. All right. But what's your question here? Which part are you confused with? These here? Or, okay? Or means so if I say to you, he's wearing a black shirt, or he's wearing a black hat, or he's not wearing a black hat, okay? Is my statement true or false? True, because I used or. Does that make sense? If I'm saying to you, he's wearing a black shirt, or excuse me, and he's wearing a black hat, now I'm losing. Now my statement's false. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? He's obviously not wearing a black hat. Is that correct? So the thing is that when you say or, either of the 2 things has to be satisfied. Does that make sense? So it either needs to be part of this or it needs to be part of this. Does that make sense? All right. If I say and, then both things need to be satisfied. You need to be on both streets. Does that make sense? So which is the stuff that's in both streets in this case? Oh, here, let's do this. You want another question? You should never ask for more questions. So no, I'm just kidding. But what if I said this? P and Q and R, like that. Almost the same question. I just changed this thing to that thing. Does that make sense? Well, then all that would change is, well, this would just simply be what? 8, 10, 11, 12, but now it says and that. Is that correct? What's the answer to this? Empty set is correct. There is nothing that's in both of them. Is that correct? Does that make sense? Does that help a little bit? The only thing that we need to know really well is which one and means and which one or means. Does that make sense?
What the other one? No, the U one is neurospecific.
Well,
The
there's
other one
different,
is
so like
not-
this is supposed to be like a capital U. It's hard to see here, but this is supposed to be like a capital U right there. All right, this thing goes between 2 sets. So this is also a U, but it's not this thing. This and this are not the same. Because this means or, this means a specific set. Okay,
I like reading books.
well, it's just because you didn't get to see the stuff from last time. So if you do the homework and you look at the stuff from the book, you'll be okay. All right. All right, 3. So similar, but just now more not. Does everybody see that? All right, so what we gonna do first? What's in the parentheses? But to do what's in the parentheses, I gotta do something else first. I have to figure out what not X is. Does that make sense? So I might as well do that first. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, but you're right. All right. So what is not X? D. So AHPT, so this is DKR. Does that make sense? Not the X stuff, but U is the overall. Does that make sense? Okay. So then how do I do what this is? Uh-huh.
So.
What is it? DHKPR. Because it says the stuff that's here or the stuff that's there. Well, all this crap is actually there already. Does that make sense? So this or this is really just that. Is that correct? Yes. And would just be this stuff. And is what's in both of them or is what's in either one of them. Does that make sense? You just got to be very specific with these words.
Wait,
Right.
but how is, because not X doesn't have H
That's fine.
or E.
So wait, you got a bag of stuff, okay? You got a bag of stuff. You have well, let's just consider them to be letters, all right? So we got these letters, okay? Your bag of letters has a DK and an R in it, all right? I got another bag of letters that has a DHKP or an R in it. I ask you, which letters do we have in either bag? Well, we have a DHKP or an R.
Okay, so it's, so basically that and the and means,
No, this is or,
the or means
either one.
the or. So both of them have in common and.
Both of them have in common is and. Or means the one that's in either one of the two bags. So just give me everything. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, this and Y. Y is whatever. ADH, right? Okay, so now we need to do this. What is this? AT, is that what you said? That's correct. Not the stuff in here, so not DHKPR, that's A or T. Does that make sense? Then we need to intersect this with ADH. Okay. A. And means what's in both bags now. Does that make sense? A is the only thing common in both bags. Does that make sense? Question? Artem? You got a question? I can see it on your face.
Yeah, I'll ask it.
Now's a better time than later. It never gets easier. So you got to figure out each example. It only gets more confusing. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So the point is that you just need to understand what's going on with these things here and then just keep applying it. Otherwise,
What is that thing
T?
that right next to, oh, there's the railroad.
T's there, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that was Anderson.
Gotcha. So then this thing here, let's just do it again. X prime is the stuff not in X. Okay, so that's not H, not A, not P, not T. That's D, K, and R, right? Then it says that and union that with Z. So what's in the collection of this thing or this thing? Well, that would just be DHKPR. Does that make sense? So we have DHKPR. Negate that or not that or complement that, whatever you want to call it. So not these things, that would be A or T. That's A or T. Now it says A or T intersected with ADH. So what's in this and in this? A. Does that make sense? Anyone have a question? When I was in school, they never taught me this. But this is easy, but they never taught it to me. All right. So because there's another way we can write this. And you don't need to define the symbol. But X such that, so A minus B, this is referred to as set difference. A minus B is the stuff of the X's, where the X's are in A and the X's are not in B. This is the exact same thing as saying A and not B. It's the exact same thing. All right. So that's why they never taught it to me in school. They wanted me to understand the knots better, I guess. But doesn't matter. All right, so A, not B, is this crap. That's the stuff that's in A, but not in B. Does that make sense? That's also the intersection of A and not B. Does that make sense? Let's just draw that with a picture also. Any questions so far with this though? This means tell me what's in A, but remove all the stuff from B. Does that make sense? All right. What's left in A's house after you take everything from B's house out? Does that make sense? All right. Just to show you again with these pictures, that these pictures end up becoming a little bit important. So I said that A minus B is the same thing as A intersect not B. Is that correct? All right, let's draw these a little bit. Okay, so to do A intersect not B, first let's do A. Okay, that's A, right? Not B is the stuff that's not in B. That stuff right there. Does that make sense? Now it says, and these two things, which part's common to both of them. Does that make sense? Well, that would have to be that part. Does that make sense? That's A minus B. Does that make sense? Do you understand? Question? So these diagrams sometimes are helpful in terms of determining, you know, which region you're referring to. That's the whole reason. I'd much rather draw these diagrams than to reason this all out just in my head. Does that make sense? All right. If you do it with the diagrams, I'm telling you, it's much simpler. Does that make sense? Question so far? Another way you can think about it is that if I take this previous picture here and I draw both sets on the exact same diagram, then I look for the portion that's double shaded. That has to be the answer, which is this green part. Does that make sense? Question? Okie dokery. All right, what you got for the first one? Six and seven is correct. How do you get that? That's correct. So the B is this stuff here, right? Now it says remove A. Right? Remove the crap from A. Does that make sense? So then B, take the stuff of A away. Okay? So like, can I take a 2 from here? No, there is no 2. Does that make sense? Can I take a 3 from here? Yeah, there's a 3. Get rid of that crap. 4, can I take a 4? Yep. Get that guy out of here. Okay, good. So then we get 6 and 7 and something. What's in B? Take away the stuff that's in A. Does that make sense? It's like we both went to the store and we bought some crap, right? And then I'm like, what does B have that A doesn't have? Does that make sense? That's B minus A. Does that make sense? All right. A minus B. 2 is correct. Good. You gotta take A, remove the crap B has now. Oh, B has a 3 and a 4. Great. Remove this stuff. Does that make sense? So the A minus B must be 2. So the reason why they're showing you this is A minus B is not necessarily equal to B minus A. Does that make sense? It could be, but it's not always the same. Does that make sense? In terms of pictures, that's blatantly obvious. And again, that's why the pictures are better. So if you have A, B here, right? A minus B is this thing over here. Does that make sense? But B minus A is that part. Yeah, they ain't the same. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys? All right, in terms of the picture, it's much easier, in my opinion, to realize the general result. Does that make sense? All right. What's B minus C? That's B and C. You gotta take the stuff from C and remove it from here. So 7 is also over there. So I gotta get rid of it. So we got 3, 4, 6. You told me what's in common. You did it backwards. Okay, but does that make sense? All right, C minus A. Nope. What'd you say? That's correct. Because look, A here, right? Simone, is it? A has 2, 3, 4. C ain't got that. Does that make sense? Right? So C minus A. You don't gotta take nothing away. Does that make sense? All right. I can't remove these from C. They're not even in C to begin with. Is that right? Okay. Also, I was saying to you, like, if you think about these as 2 bags and we went to the store, right? And then both of us bought something. So C bought something and A bought something. I want to know what C bought that A didn't buy. All the crap C bought that A didn't buy. Does that make sense? 5, 7. C minus A means the stuff that's in C and it's not in A. You just got to make sure you compliment the right thing. Okay, so not the A crap. Does that make sense? So C and not A. Okay, what's in not A? Well, everything but 2, 3, and 4. That means I can't count 2, 3, or 4 here. Okay, well, that doesn't really matter. It's 5 and 7. Does that make sense? All right. Question? Does it make sense, guys? You got to be careful with stuff like this because the problem is you're trying to subtract numbers. We're not talking about numbers here. Yeah, but you can't, like, I don't want to say it that way because the problem is that like I could have 1, 2, 3 here, right? And then I could have A, B there. This is like, there's 2 elements here, there's 3 elements here. If I do set difference in this case, we end up with just A and B because these things are not on that side. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So it's not good to think about it with numbers. That's how people actually are getting confused with this stuff. Okay, it just means you got a collection of stuff, you got another collection of stuff, remove the stuff that's common to both of them. Does that make sense? Perform the, that plays again, I'm gonna fall asleep. Perform the indicate operations and designate the answer using the listing method. All right. All right, so then, X prime, that just means not X, right? So I don't know, there's DFHJ, DFH, shithead. Why am I complaining now? The J, where the hell is my J? So this idiot forgot to put J here. That's kind of a big deal, though. You can't tell me there's something in X that's not in U. U has to be the biggest set that contains everything. Does that make sense? So we need a J here. All right, either that or this J should have been an I to start off with. Let's make it an I, actually. I think that might be what they have wanted. Does that make sense? All right, so then this, so X prime. Okay, so now at least all the X stuff is in here. But no, it's actually good seeing these mistakes, because then I think you better understand the way that these people are going to write the questions. Does that make sense? All right. I used to do all these math competitions when I was a kid. And one time I had to go to this math competition. I didn't want to go. I was sick. I told the teacher, I was like, I'm sick. I don't want to go. I was on this team. I was worried that these other people weren't, I was going to affect the other people and stuff like that. I was like, let me just go to sleep, because I don't want to do this shit anyway. I was like, later on is the thing that matters. I'm like, you don't even need me for this thing right now. Let me do the other thing later. She's like, no, you do that, your parents have to come pick you up. I was like, if that happens, I'm gonna get in more trouble. I was like, so I'll just go to the test, put my head down, and go to sleep, right? So then I go there and I go to the test to go put my head down and go to sleep. And they put us on these tables. And these, I just remember these like disgusting little wooden tables, like this wide or whatever. Like swear to God, like this wide, long tables, right? So I go put my head down and go to sleep. I start getting splinters in my head. I was like, because that's how old and garbage the tables were. And the so I was like, well, this ain't gonna work, right? And I started looking at the test, and like I obviously like math or whatever, but I I started looking at the test, and I was like, oh, this actually is actually kind of interesting. It's actually like, if I wasn't sick, I think I would do well on this. You know what I mean? And all right, I'm so bored, I'll start looking at it, because like you're in the middle of a test with thousands of people in the room. I can't. First of all, there were no phones, but like I can't pull the phone out. If I did, they would invalidate. Then I got in more trouble, right? So I start doing it, but I was like, I don't have enough energy to actually do this. Let me see if I can read the answer choices and try and guess what they were trying to trick people with. You know what I'm saying? I got to tell you, I learned a lot that day about how to take a test, because I started realizing how these people start writing the questions to try and trick people. Does that make sense? And I was able to actually get, so then I was being stupid, and I was like, oh, I'll show the teacher, and I'll get everyone wrong. So I started trying to get every single question wrong. Well, it was too hard. I ended up getting one right. Okay. I got the lowest score in the entire state. I got a -25 on the test. The next lowest score was something like a -5 or something like that. And that's what I did. But I got to tell you, I actually learned a lot by doing that. And it actually helps me now to this day, write tests and stuff like that. Because I want to make sure that you answer the question without me telling you the answer based off what I wrote or something like that, right? I help people do all these math competitions all the time still now. I still teach this crap. And it helps me teach these people. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to think about this stuff. Does that make sense what I'm saying? All right. So when this mistake is actually happening here, I think it not only helps you understand some of the symbols, but it helps you understand why someone would write the question. Because why would I sit here and change this J to an I? Because there's an I here also. Does everybody see that? Then there's a question like, well, what should it be now? Does that make sense? If it was just J, it's kind of easy. Does that make sense? All right. Anyway, whatever. Oh, here's the rest of the story. So then on the way home from this math competition, we have to get on the bus and they usually start telling us our scores and all that stuff. Oh, you did a good job, blah, blah, blah. They call my name first. I was like, oh, I guess I did well. She takes me up to the front of the bus. We're going to talk about this thing about probability later in this class a little bit, all right? Probability is a chance of something happening. So she sat there and calculated the chances that someone randomly guesses and ends up getting a -25 on a test. She had been doing this for years and years and years and years. She never saw anybody get a -25 before. So she comes up, she tells me. She knows I know how to calculate it with the probability and stuff like that. She's like, you know what the chances were that someone gets a score like that on the test by randomly guessing without trying to get them all wrong? You know what the chances are? About 1 in a million. You know what that means? She immediately taught me statistics at that point a little bit. Because what she was trying to say was the chances of this happening is so rare. There's virtually no chance that you ended up doing this by a mistake. I know what you did. And then she turned around to me and she said, you ever do this again, I'm never taking you on one of these things again. Right? And you know, usually I'm the type of person, I didn't do that. Immediately I was just like, oh, yeah, you're dead on. You're 100% right. You caught me. You know, like what else can I say? So like but my point is like these types of ideas are actually very important with some things. All right. Because based off of this math crap, I can sit there and tell if someone's lying. You get what I'm saying? All right. And they don't even know how I'm telling. So they can't even hide it. You get what I'm saying? All right. So that's why they teach you a lot of these things. That's why people do a lot of statistics in a lot of cases. All right. We'll talk all about that when we get to the last unit though. All right. X prime minus Y. So first we should determine what X prime is. I already did that, I think. What is X prime? E and G, right? Now we need to subtract from that Y, which is that thing. So what is this? G is correct. Does that make sense? Subtract the track stuff from over there from this thing. E is over there that's in this thing. Remove the E. Does that make sense? Any question?
Is there any way I can get a present in this class?
Say one more time.
Is there any way I can get a present in this class?
Then you can get a passing grade in this class. You gotta do your work. I mean, we'll talk about it afterwards. All right.
Thank you.
I can tell you what to do, but you gotta take the test and stuff. All right. This thing. What would you say? Outside of the parentheses, there is no complement on the outside. C, that's a prime on the outside of this thing. It means not this stuff, but we gotta do B first. So first I need to know, so X obviously we know already. D, F, H, J, right? Oh yeah, we gotta change it to I again. Okay, let's make that an I again, sorry. All right, but then we need to do whatever this is. How are we gonna do that? If you read it and don't try and think about what it means and just try and read it using the stuff I'm saying, you'll actually probably be able to tell me what it is. What if you just read this? What would it mean to you without knowing what's inside? Well, how would you read that part? Don't say compliment. What'd you say? Perfect. Does that make sense? This means not Y and not Z. Is that correct? I didn't say not C. Not Z. You know, I got this kid at the other school. This German kid. He gave the Jewish kid a Hitler Youth book. I don't even know where you get. No, it's actually, it's not that bad. So like what ended up happening was that there's some German kid. So all these white kids in the class, they're all friends with each other, but they gave the German kid a Hitler Youth book. So then he's like, I don't want this crap, right? So then he gives it to one of the other kids, but that kid happened to be Jewish. So then anyway. Something similar to this happened to you?
And but how he said it in a way
The wrong way.
like he tried to make it seem like it was in that plain history we were talking about, like, well, you got home. So my professor decided the next day, he was just like, okay, he gave him a copy of the Woody Literature. He was quiet after that.
Except that.
Told the professor he didn't do it.
When I was in 6th grade, I don't know, all these, when I was a kid, like people weren't as nice as they were today, honestly. But when I was a kid, when I was in 6th grade, I remember everybody's using this word faggot. Okay. And I said it in front of the teacher. And she's like, no, you're gonna learn what that word means. And you ain't gonna say it again. Okay. And I was like, ha ha ha, yeah, right, whatever. Everybody says it, blah, 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 blah. She's like, no, you're gonna write about the origin of the particular word, and you're gonna explain to me where it came from. And then once you explain to me where it came from, I guarantee you don't say it again. I expect you to write the paper by tomorrow, right? I was in 6th grade, okay? And then I was like, I don't even know how to do this. Like, I'm lucky if we had a dictionary at home. So then I remember getting a dictionary, looking up the word in the dictionary, and it actually explains, where the word came from, right? And I don't know, does anybody know another usage of the word faggot? Cigarette. Okay, they use it to say a fag, a cigarette. Sometimes people say this. Okay. This honestly still makes me uncomfortable even saying this, but the original etymology of the word came from Europe. Okay. So like, and what it was that, they used to burn witches, right? Oh, you're a witch. We got to burn you, right? As if they knew what a witch was. Anyway, but they used to burn the witches. Okay. So they come up with all these stupid reasons why someone's a witch and all this stuff like that, right? All right, so they burn the witches. Well, what do you use to burn the witches? They used to call them faggots. Okay, wooden sticks. All right, and then a bundle of wooden sticks. This is also called evidently a faggot. These people used to call this. They used to use homosexuals as the fire starter material. So they were burning people to burn other people. You know what I mean? Anyway, that was the meaning of the word. Guess what? I never used the word again. But the point that I'm trying to make is sometimes just, get that kid to shut the hell up. So but this thing here, you'll see we transition right back to math. Anyway, but this thing here, y prime and z prime here, this is the stuff that's not in y and not in z, right?
The one means in a prime.
Prime means not. So not y means get rid of this stuff. Not, yeah, the apostrophe means not.
Oh,
So then not z means GHI, cross that out. No, you gotta be careful, actually. I wanted to do it in a way that was gonna confuse you. So not y here is gonna be equal to what? GHI? Is that correct? Not z is gonna equal to EFGHI, so that's just D. Sorry. D and F, is that right? There's an F, sorry. So this, it's just D, I was right the first time. All right, good. So then this is D. Now intersecting these two things though is empty. Does that make sense? All right. But I was just saying, if you think about it the way I was saying it the first time, not Y and not Z. The stuff that's in not Y and it's not in Z. Yeah, it's empty. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? What is the union of these two sets? DFHI. Because what's the union of this or the empty set? There's nothing in this. So it's just that stuff. Question? You just count that also. It would be these or whatever's there. So if the thing was already included in this, you wouldn't do anything. If the thing was not included in this, you would have to add it to it. Does that make sense? Don't forget also, by the way, guys, like you do get free tutoring hours through the school. Yep. And the Academic Success Center does have appointments. All right. So you can just go to the tutoring lab and like honestly, no one uses it the way they used to. You know, like nobody comes to campus anymore and stuff like that. They still pay these people to sit there. Right. And I told you about this, I believe, but it's just that building, 2 buildings over there, 2nd floor. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? I think it's building 72. All right. Yeah. So then you just go to building 72 over there and you can make appointments online also. So if you go to the Academic Success Center website, we talked about it last time. It says WEC online, you can schedule appointments. All right. And you get, I think 30 minutes a week for free. All right. But if they're not gonna be there, if their people aren't there and you sit there for 30 minutes and then nobody shows up, guess what? They still got to help you for the next 45 minutes. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, don't forget about that. Okay. Cause that is always there. All right. And they do meet online with you now also. So if you want to, all right. I don't recommend doing that as much. No, online is kind of whatever. Also, if you go there and the person sucks, you're like, yo, give me another person, right? It'll work out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I don't like saying this, but like if you go to Central Campus and you're a girl, they're very friendly. All right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's always the best thing, but you can use it against them. You know what I mean? Like it's not, I'm just being honest. All right. Oh, they are? Most of the classes are over there. Most of the classes all over the place are in Central. There's been a lot less classes in South. lately. Oh no, they got some nice stuff over there. They got some nice, no, because I used to teach at FAU and FIU and some of the facilities here are actually better than those places. I like that. Honestly, I like FIU. FIU, honestly, the same thing for most part. Oh, really? Now, that's the whole thing. That's a good thing about the AA degree. I mean, like everybody who gets their associate's degree should go on and attempt to try to finish their bachelor's degree. Everything automatically transfers for you. That's the whole point of the program. Does that make sense? It's a good program. All right, what would you say Y minus X is here? Nope. E is correct. Y minus X. Does that make sense? So then this is going to be E complement union, then Z is whatever this says. E, F, G, H, I. All right, what's not E? That would be D, F, G, H, I. We're unioning that with E, F, G, H, I. This would then be D, E, F, G, H, I. Either one of the two. Does that make sense? Question?
understand this first one. P, F, G, and then
HI.
H.
Z is already given to you. It's right here. I was just copying it. Question? This is a stupid question. Nah, I don't want to do these. These are bad questions. Okay. Sort of. The only thing is that when I see people don't do it, then they're really stupid. So it's like, the way I say things is like this, like I don't know anybody who likes practicing anything.
I like practicing basketball.
If I give you more practice, you won't. I guarantee if I go and run you, you won't want to practice anymore. So the thing is because I used to play basketball when I was a kid, and like sorry. I mean, I was actually a center, believe it or not. But yeah, when I was younger, I was the same height now than when I was in 8th grade. So I was 5'11" when I was in 8th grade or something like that. So then when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade, yeah. So then I was like the tallest kid in my elementary school actually. But I'm telling you, you go give people enough practice, anybody's gonna turn around and tell you they don't want to do it anymore. You know what I mean? So there are some math problems that I feel like add value to certain things. There's some math problems that I feel like are just like useless exercises. These I would say are just useless exercises. All right, so place the elements into the Venn diagram. All right, this we talked about before already. You should be able to tell me what to do here. Okay, so what should I do? What are you thinking? Start with the intersection first, right? So what is that? And no, there's one more. T, U, what else? G is correct. Now just make sure you get rid of them over here also. Does everybody see that? All right, always place the ones in the center first, then what? And F. Maybe you are blind. No, I'm just kidding. So then this, right? Any questions so far? What else? K, N, and R. Those go in this B thing here. Is that okay? And then what else do we do? So you can see fine. Does it make sense? Any question here so far? All right, you help me. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. If they ask me to shade this, which regions do I shade? B prime intersect A prime. 1 is correct. Good. Very good. All right, first I'm going to say in words. So this is stuff not in B and it's not in A. So it's stuff outside. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to say it with diagrams. So B prime means all the stuff not in B. All the stuff not in B is this stuff. A prime is all the stuff not in A. So that means it's this stuff. Does everybody see that? Question? So the stuff where this is double shaded is the outside region. Does that make sense?
So one is B, hold on.
The prime means not. This is not B and not A.
Oh, so that means super,
And means the part that's in both of them. So B prime, I'm labeling with all of the yellow stuff. A prime, I'm labeling with all the blue stuff. There's some places that are labeled with both of them though. That's the correct answer, this stuff. Does that make sense?
No, but I'll put it.
The stuff that's labeled with both of them is the stuff outside here. Not that crap, that's only labeled yellow. Not this stuff, that's only labeled blue. All of this is labeled with both of them. So that's why I'm shading this stuff here. Okay? Now, there's a trick with this. This trick is helpful. Okay? So there's something that's referred to as De Morgan's laws.
I heard about this.
Really?
Yeah, no, because I was studying.
Oh, so this one you saw in the book?
Yeah, I saw that title.
It turns out what you can do is this. All right. A intersect B prime. Okay? This means not the stuff in A and B, right? A and B is the center part right there. Not that stuff is all of the rest of it. It's all of the stuff in regions 1, 2, and 4.
So on this side, the upside down W is intersect?
Yeah, upside down A, sort of, right?
Well, no, it was like.
Oh, U, upside down U.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this. Now, if I do the right side here, the right side says not A or not B, not A. Or not B. Not B means okay, that stuff. So in other words, all this crap but the thing in the center ends up getting shaded. Does that make sense? Why am I saying this is a good thing? Because this is actually very simple to do algebraically or symbolically, all right? Because all I'm doing here is when the prime is on the outside, you can sort of distribute the prime to everything on this in the inside, all right? So the prime goes to the A, the prime goes to the B, and the prime goes to the and switches it to an or. Does that make sense? So if you put a prime on the outside here, all you do is just not that, change this to an or, not that. You get this. Does everybody see that? All right. Same thing here. If I distribute this one to this, you end up getting A prime intersect B prime. This is an easy way to see the two things are equivalent to each other. Does that make sense? What's your question? This says A intersect B, not all of that. So this is A intersect B, the thing in the center, right? Bless you. Not that is all of this. The complement of that set, everything else. Well, because what I did this one first here, then I did this one here, but they're giving us the same answer in terms of the shaded regions. Does that make sense? In other words, they're equivalent. Does that make sense? Okay, but I'm showing you that with this, you can do it with the symbols just like that. You want to know that these two things are equivalent? You just distribute this to this, distribute this to this, distribute that to that. You get this. Does that make sense? that make sense? So if they write this, I'm allowed to say that this is really the exact same thing as A union B not. This is simpler for me to understand than this. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yes or no? All right. Shade the regions in the Venn diagram. A union B prime intersect A, blah, blah, whatever. All right, so this is A, B. Does everybody see that? This says not in B and it's in A. That's actually fairly easy to say what that set means. Does that make sense? That part right here is just that. That's the stuff in A and it's not in B. Is that correct? Does that make sense? Now it says, or this with A. What would the answer be? As what? Say one more time. That's correct.
Yeah,
It would be just A, because this says the stuff that's in A or the stuff that's in A minus B. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? What's in A or in A minus B? Whatever's in A.
oh, okay, I'm understanding.
So. So, for example, right, we get a question like this, shade the region
Mm-hmm.
and it's deep.
Intersect.
Looks like what you shaded on the left there,
Mhm.
you also shaded as the what you showed on the right.
Yes, but they are the exact same thing. So you're not reading the one on the right side correctly. So the thing is that this I said was B prime is all the yellow stuff. Does that make sense? A prime is all the blue stuff, right?
So you might as well just go and
Well, no, this says and, right? So that means I have to find the portions of the blue and that's also with the yellow,
oh, okay. So
which would just be the outside part, which is just this side, this part. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Okay. Question? Does it make sense, guys?
I'll forget it.
Now they give you 3 of these things. They ask you to do the same crap. They say,
See? Well, what did I do?
what should we do? What do you think? Same thing we did before. Start from the inside, work your way out. Does that make sense? The only difference is that this part here is A and B and C. Does that make sense? Okay, but it sounds like this is gonna be confusing. And it kind of is, but actually it ends up being easier to look at that than it looks at anything else. Because this is so specific that I can immediately start saying what goes in there. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? I can immediately also say what goes on the outside. Those are usually the 2 easiest things. Does that make sense? The outside is not A, intersect, not B, intersect, not C. Not A and not B and not C. Does that make sense? All right. Let's label these regions so that we can refer to them a little bit. So this is 1. Let's call this one 2. Let's call this one 3. Let's call this one 4. Let's call this one 5. This one's 6. This one's 7. And then this last one, we'll call it 8. All right. All right. So I'm saying this is region 6. Does that make sense? What goes into region 6? I mean, H is in everything. Is that right? K is in everything. Is that it? Because all I have to do is look at A. L is not in this one. M is not in this one. O is not in this one, right? So that's it. Those are the only things that are in all three. Does that make sense? So then we get H and K, get rid of that crap. Great. H and K goes here. Does that make sense? And just keep going like that. Does that make sense? All right, now. Which part would you do next? 3 is correct. 3 is a part of this big region here. This big region is the same region we referred to in the previous case. That was A and B. Is that right? Does that make sense? It's still A and B, okay? But 3 is more specific. 3 is A and B and not C. Does that make sense? Right? C's over here. Get rid of the C crap. Is that correct? All right. So what's in A and B, but it's not in C, L? Anything else? No, anything else that we've already mentioned that's in A and B is actually also in C. Is that correct? So that means we write L there. Does that make sense? And we just keep going. All right. What about Cinco over here? If you had to label that, what would that be? 5 would be what?
A and C.
Right. So that's A and not B, and it's C. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? No, I'm just writing in the order. You can, I like the way you said it better, honestly. A and C and not B, but it doesn't make any difference. Does that make sense what I'm saying? All right. It's a good question, but it doesn't make any difference. All right. So 5, A and B prime and C. Is that right? All right. What the hell is that crap? Yep. M M O O M M O O. Does that make sense? Question? What is next? 7. If you had to label 7 in terms of A, B, and C, what would it be? Right. This is B and C, and it's not an A. Does that make sense? What is that? J, N, and P is correct. J, N, and P, right? So then we write J, N, and P. Is that correct? Now, if I keep crossing these things out, it's really going to be easy to figure out what goes on the outside, right? But you got to kind of just do this little bookkeeping as you're going. Does that make sense? All right. All right. What you want to do next? Region 2, you mean?
Oh, yeah.
Because A is confusing. A is like all this crap. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Region 2 is what? The stuff that's in A and it's not in B and it's not in C. Is that correct? What is that stuff? Aye, matey. Does that make sense? Anybody confused with what I'm doing here so far? Question?
I like reading books, and like, I was never gonna, I don't,
It's just practice.
I know.
It's just a lot of practice.
And
That's all it is.
I was never.
So then, will we have a question or no? Try and go to the tutoring now. Try and go to the tutoring because then I'm telling you, most of the problem you're having is just because you didn't do it last week or 2 weeks ago. All right, we've already had homework assignments and stuff like that. Okay, so then 7, right, is this 4? Four is not A and it's B and it's not C, right? So that needs to be the stuff that's in B that's not in this crap, but we already knocked everything out. So that's actually There's nothing in there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. 8. 8 is not A and not B, but it's in C, right? Q is correct. Q. Does that make sense? And then this is the part that we actually could have said right from the beginning that I didn't need to go and go all the way around to do this or whatever. This set, which seems somewhat confusing, is actually, again, very specific. So A, not A and not B and not C is all the stuff that's not in A, B, or C. Is that correct? So what is that? You could just look through this list and see that. Does that make sense? Don't forget, I have everything posted online for you. All right, it's better to watch the video again. Does that make sense? All right. I don't care if you take pictures. It doesn't bother me or whatever. But the thing is I'm just telling you, from all these years of teaching, people I see have the most problems, the ones that take the pictures. Because they just, first of all, take a lot of pictures, hard to look at all of them later. Also, you take a picture, honestly, like if you didn't understand it while we're doing it now, are you going to be able to figure it out from the picture? Probably not. Does that make sense? So then if you just get in the habit instead of just watching the video, makes it a lot easier. Does that make sense what I'm saying? But you should be. Because it doesn't reinforce it.
I realize I have to do the
For sure. But the thing is that I'm just telling you, writing it down and doing it is, you really do remember more for no, like, and it's too many people now because we're so used to phones and all these things. Very few students do it. And honestly, it's one of the biggest problems. Right? Sorry to make an example. So this thing, A prime intersect B prime intersect C. Okay, let me explain to you how I would do this. So I think you'll start understanding how to shade this stuff. Does that make sense? All right. First of all, it says and C. If you say and C, it has to be in C. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So I can sort of start with just this. Because if it says and C, it has to be in there. Does that make sense? The thing has to be in C. Is that right? All right, now if we just read this again. Now these stupid parentheses here are meaningless. If I write this, it's the same thing as the original one in this particular case. Does that make sense? So it's not A or B. So it's this part. And that's it. Does that make sense? The stuff that's in C that's not in A, and it's not in A, and it's not in B. Does that make sense? Because if this is A and that's B, and then this thing is C, well, it has to be this region. Does that make sense, guys? Question? Anybody? This is C, right? That part's A. That part's in A and B. That part's in B. It says it can't be in A and it can't be in B. That's the only part that's not in A, not in B, but it's in C. Does that make sense? Okay. So here, I probably actually would do whatever's in the parentheses first here, just because I would make sure I understand what that means. So like if this is A, this is B, and this is C, then I start thinking about the fact that this says or here. Does everybody see that? So it means this thing or everything in here. Does everybody see that? Well, or the stuff that's not in C, but I'm considering C prime to just be a set. Does that make sense? So A intersect B. All right, that part's actually fairly straightforward to me. That part, we just ignore C. That's A intersect B. Is that correct? Does that make sense? Now it says or, count everything that's not in C. Does everybody see that? So what else could I count? Well, I guess the outside I could definitely count. That's not in C. Is that right? Then there's more stuff that's not in C that I didn't count. This I could count also. This is not in C. Is that right? Then the B thing also. But then that would have to be it, because everything else here is in C. Does that make sense what I did? Question? Because it said A and B. That part's A and B. It says the stuff that's in A and B or the stuff that's not in C. Not the stuff that's and not in C. Or either one. So this is the stuff that's in A and B, right? Right? Then it says, or give me all the stuff that's not in C. This is not in C, that's not in C, this is not in C, that's not in C, and that's not in C. Does that make sense? Or either bag. Does that make sense? Question, guys? You want me to draw with two colors? Yes? So if I'm gonna shade not C. Like, that's definitely not C. There's no question. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Now it says, tell me all the crap that's in A and B, or it's in not C. Does that understand?
That point right down at the top.
Or,
No,
or, either one, not both. Either one.
just the top one.
No,
No?
no, that's and. That's the stuff that's in the blue part and the yellow part.
Oh,
I said or. You understand?
you said, oh.
Okay, so then or means effectively all of it. Does that make sense? So that just means anything that was already shaded. Is that correct? Not the one that's in both of them. The one that's in either one. You could be in either street. Does that make sense? Question? Again, shading it, I think, is a fairly straightforward way to do it. Does that make sense? Okay. And that's why they're trying to teach us this whole thing with the Venn diagrams. Any question? Everybody okay? When is it true that A is equal to A minus B? If A intersect B is empty. How can we show this? It's a little confusing, honestly. So we have A and B here, right? When, if they subtract something from B, or excuse me, from A, is it still going to remain being A? Does that make sense? This says you subtract B from A, but you end up with A. Does everybody see that? So then, if I take away B from A, but I still end up with A, that means I really didn't take anything away from A. Is that correct? Right? The only way for that to happen, A minus B means take the stuff away from A that's in B. That means there can't be anything in B that's also in A. Is that correct? So then what we could do is you just sort of like, if this was like this, then A minus B would just be A. Is that correct? They have no intersection. Does that make sense what I'm saying? This would only be true if the intersection is not there. Does that make sense? Because if there is something in the intersection, that means you have to remove it from A then. Is that correct? Does that make sense? Anyway, that one's kind of confusing. All right, when is it true that this is true? This should, we'll talk about when this is true, but I almost don't want to do that yet. All right, I want to teach you the thing first. This is very important. We're going to be tested on this like 3 or 4 times throughout the year. Okay, the same exact thing over and over. All right. What they want to know is N of A means, I think we already did this already actually, but N of A means, this is pronounced N of A. This means the number of distinct elements in A. Sometimes people also refer to this as the cardinality of A, okay? How many things are in there? Does that make sense? Yeah, we definitely did this before. All right, so then I can show you on the other worksheet if you want to see. How many people remember discussing this at all? You remember? You see what I mean? Like I guarantee there's a large majority of people in this class don't remember the symbol whatsoever. And we definitely did it the other time. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to reinforce the fact that this stuff is very easy to forget, especially if you don't do it for a little while. All right. So N of A, the number of distinct elements in A, this is also referred to as the cardinality of A. Cardinality just means the number of things. All right. So they want to know something about what is N of A union B. Does everybody see that? All right. Now, I like to think about these things with like rooms and like carpet. Like you're putting carpet on the floor. Does that make sense? And like, how much carpet do I have to buy? Does everybody sound like that? All right. So if I say N of A union B here, right? If I buy enough carpet for room A and I buy enough carpet for room B, did I buy the right amount of carpet? Why or why not? If I buy the amount of carpet needed for room A, and then I separately purchase the amount of carpet needed for room B, did I buy the right amount of carpet? You would say no. Why? Okay.
Like 2, 4, yeah, 2, that's 4. That is in That's just.
You're getting to the point that I need you to get to, but I don't like the way you said it. But the thing is that's the point. Okay, that's the important part. What you're saying. I didn't buy the right amount of carpet. You're 100% correct. All right, I bought way too much. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Because no, I'm just talking about carpet in a damn room. What elements? What are you talking about? You got 2 rooms, you got carpet. I don't know, elements, what the shit you're talking about. No, I'm serious. Like you're thinking too much about some of these other definitions and words and stuff like that. I'm trying to explain it in terms of just the set diagram, right? And just say that pretend this is a room, and the 2 rooms overlap. Does that make sense? And you got, one day we go and buy the carpet for room A, right? And then my wife comes in, she's like, yo, you forgot half the damn thing. Like, go finish your job, right? And then I go and purchase carpet for room B. And then I come and bring it home. Well, guess what? I already covered this part right here. Is that correct? Is that right? If I buy the amount of carpet for room B, I bought this much extra. Is that correct? If I already did A. Does that make sense? All right. So all I'm saying is that if you buy this, great. If you choose to buy this now, you definitely just bought whatever's in the center twice. Is that correct? That's not the right amount of carpet we should have purchased. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Do you understand? I bought extra. Is that right? They want to know how many things are in A or B, not how many things are just when you add them together. Does that make sense? All right. Some things could be in common in both of them. Is that correct? So what they say is the number of elements in A union B is equal to the number of elements A plus the number of elements in B minus the number of elements in the intersection, because otherwise you counted it twice. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? This is the general formula. This is always true. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying? If you bought this thing twice in the center, if I subtract it once, then we'll still end up with the right amount. Is that right? Okay. Now, we say if A intersect B is empty, right? Then the number of elements in A intersect B is 0. Is that correct? Sometimes people say, when you say this, A and B are disjoint. That's the word when there's no intersection. Does that make sense? There's no joint portion. They're disjoint. Does that make sense? Then this equation can be written like that. Does that make sense? This part ends up being 0 now, if they're disjoint. Does that make sense? So this is the general type of diagram. The disjoint type of diagram means that like A and B have no intersecting portion. So if I bought the stuff for A and I bought the stuff for B separately, it would add up to the total. Does that make sense? Do you understand? Question here? Again, this is all over the homework. It's all over the book. But this is the general rule. This is really just the specific rule when this part ends up equaling 0. Does that make sense? Question here? So he's actually, she wrote this, but they're trying to con you a little bit here. Does that make sense? This is not always true. This is always true. This is true if n of A and B is equal to 0. Does that make sense? Which is the same thing as saying A intersect B is empty. Question? When is it true that A intersect B is contained within A? Always. If you draw a picture, you should be able to tell me this one. So if A is here and B is there, A intersect B is that part. This symbol again means is a subset of. When will this thing be a subset of A? It's always a part of A. Is that correct? Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys? That was another symbol from last time, though. Is that right? Subset, proper subset, right? Question? All right, we got one more worksheet we got to do. So now he wants me to use this formula, given these values, to figure this thing out. Does that make sense? Can you tell me the answer? Don't all jump at once. Slow down. It's too loud. I can't hear all the answers. I need the Jeopardy music. Thank you. What do you say? Don't be a chicken. 39 is correct. So the this n of A union B says it must equal to n of A plus n of B minus the stuff that's in the intersecting portion. Count all the stuff in A, count all the stuff in B, but you just count the intersecting portion twice, subtract the intersecting portion. N of A says 16, n of B says 28, n of A intersect B is Cinco de Mayo. So we get what? 44 minus 5 is 39. Is that correct? Does that make sense? That one's direct application of the formula. That one everybody should be able to do. Does that make sense? All right. Find the value of this thing if this crap is true. Now, if I try to do this, this one's not too hard to do by a Venn diagram. But if I try to do this with a Venn diagram, people are going to have some problems. All right. If you use the equation, it's actually very simple. So, because they told me this part now. Does that make sense? So then they're going to say this is 30. N of A is 20. This guy is 24. N of A and B, well, that's what they want, so I'll just call that X or something. Does that make sense? All right, so now we should simplify this a little bit. 30 should equal to what? 20 plus 24 is 44. Plus, oh, I just changed it to plus. It should be minus. Does that make sense? Now you should be able to just sort of tell me the answer here. Is that correct? Positive 14. Because you put negative 14, this is going to become positive. Okay, this is going to be 14. If you want to do it algebraically, you need to add x, subtract 30, subtract 30. Does that make sense? If you add x to this side, x is here. 30 minus 30 is 0. 44 less 30 is 14. Negative x plus x is 0. We get 14. Yep. This formula, yeah. No. But I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be long and complicated for me to have to use the formula. All right. I'm telling you, if you try and do this by trying and drawing it out, it starts having some. Because what this says is it's hard to draw it. It says A union B is 30. That means anything in either of these two regions here is 30. Like, I don't know what to put down anywhere. A is 20. Where do the 20 go? Do they go here? Do they go there? I don't know. Does that make sense? Where does the 24 go? Do they go here? Do they go here? I don't know which part, what goes in which part, because they didn't tell me what's in the center. So without using the equation in this case, it's kind of hard. Yep.
Why did everyone learn how basketball?
What'd you say? Basketball?
Why did everyone learn how basketball?
Everybody bring a basketball? What are you talking?
Oh, why did everyone learn how basketball? You see, you know, he's not basketball. He's not basketball.
Oh, now I got you. They don't have it anymore? The Seahawks don't have. We used to have a basketball team. There was one dude, he ended up playing at Florida Gulf Coast, and he went to the MCAA tournament and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. He's not really. I don't even know that. I should go check. Yeah. Plus X. Plus X. Draw a Venn diagram, use the given information to fill in the number of elements in each region. See, I hate it when they do this. Like, they didn't even. Whatever. All right. Where are we gonna start? This one's not as simple. What'd you say? No. If I try to start with B, I don't know which part goes in here and which part goes there. 28 is in this whole big region. I don't know what goes here and what goes there. This could be 27 and 1. This could be 27 and that could be 1. I don't know. I can't label it yet. Does that make sense? Intersection. Always start in the intersection. So this is 12. Does that make sense? All right. Now what? 16 for B is correct. So now the thing is then this region here is B. Is that right? The total B is 28. Is that correct? We've already placed 12. Is that right? So 28 less 12 is 16. Those have to go there. Otherwise, we don't have 28 in B. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Does that make sense? All right. Now this, I think people might not even know what it means, but N of A prime union B prime. Again, with De Morgan's law, it's a little bit easier to figure out what this thing is. All right. A prime union B prime is the same thing as A and B not. Does that make sense? A and B not is kind of clear to me. It just means not this stuff. That means it's this one, and that one. Does everybody see that? There's still two parts I don't know there. Does everybody see that? I can't use this yet. Does that make sense? This one I actually can use. N of A prime is 21. How would I be able to use that?
What's not,
What's not in A? Something about the outside, but what about the outside? Before I just mess up the whole
I
thing.
mean, since B is already 16, it's not an A. It has to be the. that's not a-
What has to be? What do I put there? 21 here?
21, yeah.
Nope. Cinco is correct.
So,
What? So not A, right? Is all the stuff outside of this region. Is that correct? If it's outside of that region, it can only be there or there. Is that right? 21 minus 16 is correct. 21 minus 16 gives you 5. Does that make sense? So then those 5 have to be there. Otherwise, the stuff not in A doesn't add up to 21. Is that correct? You understand? It's annoying, but if you go nice and slow, I think you can do it just fine. Does that make sense? All right. So then we did this crap. Good. So now all we gotta do is worry about this. Now this says all the stuff not in the intersection. This is not the intersection. Is that correct? That means this, this, and this. Is that right? What goes here then? 15 is correct. So if we, N of A prime union B prime should be, if this is region 1, this is region 2, and this is region 3, region 1 or region 2 or region 3 is the same thing as saying A intersect B prime is the same thing as saying A prime union B prime. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So the number of elements in here has to be equal to the number of elements in here. Does that make sense? The number of elements in here is the same thing as saying, because these are all disjoint from each other, they have no overlapping portion, right? The number of elements in 1 plus the number of elements in 2 plus the number of elements in 3 should equal to the number of elements in A prime union B prime. Well, we already did 2. 2 is 5. We already did 3. 3 is 16. This, they told us, is 36. So then the number of things in just part 1 has to be 36 minus 16 minus 5. Does that make sense? Or 15. 36 minus 16 is 20. Minus 5 is 15. Does that make sense? Question? Yeah, that's what I would do. I don't think anything else we do is going to make it even more complicated. Does that make sense? Question? So now they just start getting a little crazy. They just say the same thing, but they start doing it with 3 steps. Does that make sense? Let's start labeling again. B, say, let's call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then let's do this one as 8. All right. I think I'm going to show you how to do it. Because we still have, let me make sure there's more. Yeah, we still have a few more examples. So let me show you how to do this first. And then you'll understand what to do. The first time I'm saying? Anything that has 3 sets here can be immediately labeled. Okay? That's just this though, in this case. Does that make sense? But anytime they mention something about 3 sets, you can immediately label it. All right? So if it's a bunch of intersections. So A intersect B intersect C is 14. Great, whatever. 14. Does that make sense? All right. Cross this crap out when you're done with it. A union, now the thing is the only things that's gonna be easy for me to answer is like, this is A union B here. Since I already know that part's 14, I could figure out what this is. If they tell me what A union B is, they did. Does everybody see that? So A union B is 81, so I just say 81 less the 14. Does that make sense? So it's 71 is what, 67. So this is 67. Does that make sense? Now that whole region adds up to 81. Is that correct? Question? Sorry? Huh? Oh, I can't read. You are correct, madam. That was completely wrong. This says union here. I was reading as intersection. I just got the whole thing wrong. All right. I should have looked at this one. A intersects C is 21. Does everybody see that? That was very bad what I just did. All right. A intersects C is 21. I should have said. A intersects C is 21. Therefore, this part has to be 7. 21 minus 14 is 7. Sorry about that. All right. Thank you. Does that make sense? What would happen is I would end up doing the whole thing and then I would realize I was wrong at the end. I would have to start back over at the beginning. You can realize when you start doing it, it won't work. Does that make sense? But still, that was bad. All right. So we get 7 here. Does everybody see that? Okay. Excuse me. I should have crossed this one out. I was trying to finish too fast. B intersects C is 23. 7? Nope. It's not 7. 9 is correct. 23 minus, we've already placed 14 in this region. Is that correct? 14, right? You just get 9. Well, this is the part where I'd say it's actually helpful to use a calculator. All right, what I should have done, because I knew there was an A intersect B here, I just can't read. A intersect B is 34. Is that right? Therefore, this should be 20. Is that correct? There's 34 units or elements in A intersect B. We've already placed 14. There has to be 20 here. Is that correct? Okay. Now, we only have a few things left here. Is that right? C, I can use that immediately to figure out this part. A, I can use that immediately to figure out this part. Is that correct? I can't use A union B here because this and this I don't know yet. Does that make sense? B prime means everything outside of B. That's like this, and that. All right. We're missing this, and we're missing that. That B prime thing we're gonna have to use last. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? All right. How can I say what goes here? That's correct. 57 should be in this entire big region here. Is that right? We've already placed 7, 14, and 20. So you just remove those. You already placed them. Is that correct? So 57 minus 7 is what? 50. 50 minus 20 is 30. 30 minus 14 is 16. Does that make sense? So all I did was 57 minus, then we already placed a 20, a 14, and a 7. Does that make sense? Question? All right, what about this one? We could do this one. Is that right? How do we do this one? Nineteen is correct. So then this is going to be, we've already placed 7, 9, and 14. Is that right? C says there's 49. So 49 minus the 9, we got 40. Then this 7 and 14 is 21. Minus 21 is 19. There must be 19 here. Does that make sense? Now what? Now you have to do 81. You can't do 55 yet because there's still 2 regions that are missing. All right. So then 81, right? How am I gonna do 81 here? A or B. Don't do the same thing I did wrong. That was what I did wrong before. A or B? 15? I didn't do it. 34, 43, 50, 50, 66, 15 is correct. All right, so 81, right? Now you've already placed 16, 20, 7, 14, and 9. Does that make sense? So if we subtract all of that stuff, 81 minus all of that stuff ends up giving you the 15 we need. That's 15. Does that make sense? Question? How would I figure out what goes on the outside? I sort of already answered it before.
Oh, and this, uh,
Not everything. What's the number should go out to? You don't add everything. Which part's B prime? The stuff that's not in B, right?
Yeah.
That's this part or that stuff. Is that correct? So then 16 plus 19 is 35. 35 plus 7 is 42. Does that make sense? 42, and they've already they want us to put down 55. Therefore, we need to do 55 minus the 42. We end up with 13 on the outside. Does that make sense? But you have to identify what the set is. Does it make sense, guys? Whatever. There's two ways you can do this. You can either use the percentages to figure out what the percentage should be of the part that they want and then multiply it by the original amount, or you can multiply the percentages by the original amount and start labeling the thing and going about it that way. I'm gonna do it the second way first, okay? So what does it mean when you say percentage of something? How do you figure that out? So what if I say like 20% of 120? How do I figure that out? Nope. All right, I'm just telling you, this thing right now, that not just some people can't do it. Most people can't do this, okay? This is the most important part of this entire class, all right? Not because this is what's gonna make you pass, not because whatever. This is going to cost you money all day long, every day, for your entire life, if you don't know what these things mean, percentages, all right? I used to work in banks. I swear to God, I used to take money from people all day long. They would sit there and I would tell them, please, please learn what I'm explaining to you here, because that's all my job is to explain this to you so that you give me more of your money, right? No, for real. Like, that's it, okay? And you know what the people would always say to me? Oh, Derek, that was a really good explanation. I don't care. Here's my money. All right. Over and over and over again. And I'm not talking about a little bit of money, millions and millions of dollars. All right. One time I remember this woman, she gave us $16 million to invest. $16 million. All right. So we invested all the money. We invested all the money, we made her some money. We did all kinds of stuff with it. Worked out well, thankfully. Until the next year. She went senile. So you know what her kids did? Took every dime. Took every dime. The woman came in one day, started asking questions and stuff like that. I went into her account. Stupid thing was fucking empty. All right. And the only thing that was going on was that these kids started taking. All right. So then she's like, where was all the damn money? I'm like, well, your kids took it. All right. Then they wouldn't give it back to her. They sold her house. They sold her house with her in it. All right. So I'm just telling you though, and they can't do anything. All right. Because that's what the paper said. But anyway, my point is that you don't let people take care of your money. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? All right. And you don't let some idiot banker sit there and do everything for you. You have to be involved. All right. The one thing that this is always about is that you're going to use it. I mean, if you tell me you don't use this crap, then what? I guess you don't buy food. You got to pay taxes when you buy food, right? Right? You got to pay taxes everywhere you go, right? That's 6%. Is that correct? Or maybe more, depending on which county you're in. But anyway, that's 6%. Do you know how to calculate that? Do you know how to calculate if they're calculating your taxes correctly on your bill? Because I'm telling you right now, I used to work in restaurants when I was a kid, and there were a bunch of restaurants I worked in where they would be like, hey, you'd be really excited when there was a really big party, right? It was a really big party. You're gonna get big tips and all this stuff, right? It's a big birthday party or something like that. Oh, everybody comes in there, they start drinking, right? Do you know what every restaurant told me to do when I used to work at these places? Yo, add more drinks. They won't notice. They're all drunk all day long. Okay. I remember one time I go to PF Chang's with another math teacher, actually. Right. So we go to PF Chang's. We go to PF Chang's. We're drinking sake. Right. And I'm sitting there and actually we were having a good time. I think PF Chang's is a little expensive, but we're having a good time when we went there. And we go and I was joking with the guy. I was like, yo, every time we go to these restaurants, right? And when I was working at these places, they would tell you to drum up the bill when people were drinking. We just got like 3 or 4 sakes. They think we're wasted, right? I was like, I guarantee that this is the time when they try and F with us on the bill. Woman comes back, brings the bill back to me. Stupid freaking thing was only like $100 or something like that for our thing, which I think was a lot for 2 people. But anyway, it was $100, right? She starts telling me the tip was like $40 and the taxes was like another $40. All right, well, 6% of 100 is 6, right? That's not 40, right? So I was joking with my friend. I was like, they're gonna pick the wrong day to mess with the wrong people. This is the only time they're gonna find math teachers at the damn table, right? So then, but this is what always goes on, right? Like, I'm cheap, okay? So I go to places when they're on sale and all kinds of stuff, right? And I see, oh, it's 30% off, it's 20% off, it's this, it's that, it's the other thing. Oh, okay. That's how much it should cost. Got it. Good. This is worth it, right? And you walk in there and I buy the thing. I remember at Marshall's. I went to Marshall's a few years ago to buy all these clothes. And I bought all these clothes at Marshall's, and the woman's sitting there and she's ringing me up. And I'm like, yo, it's 30% off, it's 20% off. Right? Let's go. She's like, oh, actually, we have a 20% off store wide also. Oh, I didn't know that. Good. Give me that too, right? She's like, oh, yeah, it's going to be this. No, that's not right. I just did it. That's not the right one. Right? You want me to show you on the calculator? I'll show you on the calculator. That's not good. I was like, that's not right. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this. That. Do you have any idea how crazy people get when I start doing that shit to them? Seriously, even if you know what the hell you're doing, I start saying it that fast to someone, they're going to start doing it. Does that make sense? All right. So, okay. Now it's time to say whatever I want because she's going to listen to whatever I want. She doesn't want me to go tell her manager and get in trouble, right? Right? All right. You were joking around before, or maybe you weren't, but anyway, you said something before about how the fact that like these stupid math problems. Listen, I 100% agree. I don't want to go do homework. I don't want to go do these things. All right. But I am telling you, there have been way too many times in my life where I have gotten way too much money for knowing these things. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? All right. The difference between you being in a situation and making lots and lots of money and making just a little bit of money typically usually ends up being something related to that. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? If you want to be a manager, right, and you want to manage people, how are you going to manage all these schedules? How are you going to manage all the money? How are you going to manage all the inventory? How are you going to manage all these things without understanding some of the stuff that we're talking about here? Does that make sense? All right. Percentages, though, have to do with bank accounts, mortgages, credit cards, right? You need to know what this means. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? All right. So The percent means per 100. Century, cent means 100. Is that correct? Now they do say something about like cross multiply or whatever, but honestly, like anytime anybody teaches you how to cross multiply, they're not teaching you the right way to do it. All right. So like if I say I don't know, 75%, that means 75 parts out of 100. Does that make sense? That means
Mm.
3/4. Does that make sense? Right? Now, everybody knows what this means. Everybody. I don't even believe you. You tell me you don't, I honestly don't believe. Does that make sense? I've taught too many of these classes. I've never seen anybody not know what it means. All right? I see people forget. I don't see anybody that doesn't understand it. Does that make sense? All right? All you have to do to go from here to there is move the decimal 2 places over, right? Because it's per 100, you need to multiply by 100. Does that make sense? Right? Now, the thing is though, percentage equals sort of like the number of things you're interested in divided by the total. Does that make sense? The fraction of things out of the total. That's the percentage. Does that make sense? If you multiply by total, that means the number must equal to the percentage times the total. Now, this is the part where I really have a problem. Not a single person in here answered this part correctly just now. All right. If I say to you, and I guarantee this is the way they explain it to you a million times, and I guarantee you're all gonna be like, yep, that's what they did. All right. But if I say to you this, right? I say to you, what is 20% of 120? That was my original question. Is that correct? 24 is correct. How do you get that? No, don't do this. That's fine, but don't do this. Okay? What do they tell you in school this means? What does the word of mean? Multiply. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Multiply. Is that correct? Right? So all you do is use the thing that I just said before, right? So like 0.20 is the same thing as 20%. You just move the decimal place 2 places. Is that right? That means another way to write this is 0.2. Is that correct? Another way to write this is multiply. Is that right? Another way to write this, well, you don't have to rewrite that. Is that correct? Does that make sense? That means the answer to this question has to be this. Is that right? Everybody can do this in their head. Everybody. All right? What's 2 times 120? 240, right? That's plus. All right? 2 times this is 240. Is that correct? There's 1 decimal point here. Great. You move this 1 decimal point over there, negative 24. Does that make sense? All the decimals. Is that right? Does that make sense? If I write it out with fractions, it's more clear. This is 2 over 10. That's the same thing as 20%, 2 tenths. Is that right? Times 100. By the way, fractions are actually better than everything. All right. Fractions actually make everything much simpler. It's just that people don't explain it that way. Does that make sense? All right. If you multiply these 2 things, this one is dividing here. Is that correct? So just divide. 10 goes into here 12 times. 12 times 2 is 24. Is that correct? Does that make sense? All right. Anyway, the only point that I'm trying to make is that this part here with the of part, you have to tell me that's multiplication. Does that make sense what I'm saying? You have to. All right. Now what you're saying is not wrong. Okay. 20 is to 100 as what is to 120. You multiply by 120. Does that make sense? Oh, people start saying you should cross multiply here. No, you should not. All right. Cross multiplying is bad here. All right. I have no idea why they teach this crap. Honestly, it teaches people completely the wrong way. Any teacher that told you cross multiply before, I wish they were in my school. Anyway, so like this Because honestly, the teachers that I manage and stuff like that, when they start saying this stuff, I'm like, stop teaching this way. This is really stupid. All right. How do you solve this equation? You get the x by itself. Is that correct? That's the only way I know how to solve it. Does that make sense? You get the stupid variable by itself. Is that right? Right now it's dividing by 120. Is that correct? How do you undo dividing by 120? You multiply by 120. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Then x should be equal to, well, this is the same thing. That is 0.2 right there, right? It's the same calculation we're doing over. Does that make sense? This is adding a step. Is that right? You understand? Now, if you do this with cross multiplying, just to explain why I'm saying this is a terrible idea. All right? Cross multiplication means you're multiplying by 120 and you're multiplying by 100. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So then you end up getting 120 times 20 equals 100 times x. Is that right? But you would still have to divide by 100. Why am I multiplying by 100 just to divide by it again? I'm literally undoing what I just did. Does that make sense? So this is why I don't like it when they teach this stuff. You understand? Question?
Yeah. I'm gonna do that.
20 divided by 100 times 120. Okay, but my point is that they should not be teaching when you have this here to solve this anything but the fact that all you have to do is get rid of the 120. They should just say, yeah, you got to get rid of this, right? It's being divided. Okay, so you want to get rid of it, you multiply by it. That's it. There's no reason to add these additional steps. It's going to confuse people. Does that make sense? All right. Anyway, I'm just saying. All right. It's much simpler if you just remember of means multiplying. Okay. And when you're solving an equation, you just need to undo the crap that's next to the x. Does that make sense? There's nothing else in any of these equation things. Does that make sense? All right. Okay, whatever. So they say there's a bunch of people, 50% shop for new clothes, 30% shop for school supplies, 20% shop for clothes and school supplies. All right. So if I say this is, they messed up again. It says new clothes here and it says clothes there and it says clothes there. We cannot have new be written here. It's confusing what that means. Does that make sense what I'm saying? All right. So this 20% here. So we see that? So then this is clothes and school supplies. Is that right? Where are we going to start? The intersection, 20%. You always start in the center and then work your way out, right? All right. So the only thing is they told us 20%. They didn't tell us what the actual number is. Is that right? We need to figure that out still. Is that correct? So then this is going to be 20% times 120. 2 times 12 is 24. There's a 0, but I'm just going to remove it anyway because it's the decimal point. Does that make sense? So then we get 24 here. Is that right? All right. Now we just keep going with this. Does that make sense? All right. So then 30% shop for school supplies. 0.3 times 120 is 36. 36, but I've already placed 24. So what goes here? 12. Does that make sense? These are all the people that shop for school supplies. 30% of the people shop for school supplies. So 36 total people shop for school supplies. 24 of those people actually ended up buying clothes also, right? All right, so then 50% shop for clothes. %50 is half, right? 60. So this is 60 minus 24 is 36. Does that make sense? How would you know what goes on the outside? We would have to take all this, add it up, and remove it from 120. Is that right? So 36 plus 24 is what? 3 plus 2 is 5. So that's 60. 60 plus 72. Does that make sense? 72 from 120 is, what'd you say? That's correct. So this is 48. Does that make sense? Now it says how many students shop for clothes or school supplies over the break. that would actually be all of these people. 72. Does that make sense? Don't forget, all this stuff is on video already. I put the video online there. So the, I don't care if you want to do it, but I'm just saying it's already gonna be there for you, all right? Does it make sense? All right, now let's just leave it at that, okay? There's another way I can do it, but I don't think it's gonna matter. All right, a bass guitarist, worked in 9 music projects last year. He wrote and produced 3 music projects, wrote a total of 5 projects. He produced a total of 7 projects. No. It's not worded very well. Middle school counselor attempting to correlate middle school performance with leisure interests found that a group of students, 34 had seen movie A, 31 had seen movie B, 26 had seen C, 17 had movie seen A and B, 11 had seen A and C, 11 had seen B and C, 4 had seen all 3, 5 had seen none. How many students had seen C only? How many seen exactly 2 films? How many students were surveyed? Okay. Where should I start?
First one, label.
Or, yeah,
Start label.
Middle, work your way out. What can I label immediately?
or
4 people seen all 3. Good, that was easy. 5 have seen none. We can do that also. Is that correct? Does that make sense? All right, good. Now, we have to take the ones that are taken 2 at a time. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? We've done everything where they talked about all 3 of them. Is that right? So this one is 11 saw B and C, right? So B and C is this whole part. So what needs to go here? 7 is correct. 11 saw B and C. Is that right? 11 saw A and C. Also 7. Does it make sense, guys? If 11 people saw A and C, then that means that this thing has to add up to 11 here. Is that right? We already put 4, so then that other part has to be 7. What goes here? 13. 17 saw A and B, so 13 goes here. Is that right? What do I do with 26 had seen C? Eight is correct. So then 7 plus 4 is 11, plus 7 is 18. Does that make sense? 18 have already been placed. 26 need to be in this whole thing. 26 minus 18 is 8. Does that make sense? All right. 31 had seen B, so this is 24. So that means this needs to be what? 7. This is 31 minus 24. We get 7. Is that correct?
Yeah, that one you got 20.
This thing here is B, has to have 31, not 21. No, 31. It's just bad handwriting. All right, what goes here? So this is 24. 10 is correct. And it looks like we labeled everything. Is that right? All right, how many students had seen movie C only? 8 is correct. Does that make sense? Any question with that? How many have seen exactly 2 films? Exactly 2, be careful. Very good. 27, that has to be this one, and this one. Those are the ones that saw exactly 2, but not 3. Is that correct? And not 1. Is that right? They saw exactly 2. Is that correct?
Oh, okay.
Simone? You understand? These people saw movies A and B. They didn't see movie C. Is that right? They saw exactly 2 movies. Is that correct? These people saw exactly 2 movies. These, you understand? Okay. All right. How many students were surveyed? That's kind of annoying. How will we do this? How are you getting it? How do we do it? You have to add up every single number here. Is that correct? So this is what, 23, 30, 30 plus 18 is what, 48? 48 plus 8 is 56. 56 plus 5 is 61. Is that what you got? Let me try it again. 10 plus 13 is 23, plus 7 is 30. 30 plus 37, 41. 48, 56, 61, yeah. It's late is correct. And if I was doing this on my test, I would be using my calculator. Is that right? Yeah. Any question? All right. That is all. Thank you.